When I was in middle school, my class took a field trip to Roy's gerbil farm. From the destination alone, I knew it was going to be a strange trip, but it also became downright terrifying. The day started like any other field trip day, excitement buzzing in the air, the chatter of classmates, and the smell of packed lunches. We boarded the bus and headed out of town, leaving behind the familiar sights of our neighborhood. As we pulled up to Roy's gerbil farm, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The farm was located on the outskirts of town, surrounded by dense woods. The main building, a large wooden structure, looked old and worn. The yard was overgrown with weeds, and the farm equipment looked like it hadn't been used in years. We were greeted by Roy, a tall, thin man with a scraggly beard and wild eyes. He led us into the main building, where rows of cages lined the walls. Each cage was filled with dozens of gerbils, their beady eyes staring at us. Roy began to tell us about the farm and the gerbils, but his voice was low and raspy, and it sent shivers down my spine. As he spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. After the tour, we were allowed to roam around the farm and interact with the gerbils. My classmates were having a blast, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I wandered away from the group and found myself in a small, dark room at the back of the building. As I stepped inside, I realized it was a storage room filled with old farm equipment and dusty crates, but what caught my eye was a small door at the back of the room, barely visible in the dim light. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. I hesitated, but something drew me forward. As I descended the stairs, the air grew colder, and the darkness seemed to swallow me whole. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a large cavernous room. The walls were lined with shelves, and on each shelf sat a row of jars. I approached one of the jars and peered inside. My heart stopped. Inside the jar was a human hand, floating in a murky liquid. I stumbled back, horrified, and as I did, I heard a sound behind me. I spun around to see Roy standing there, a twisted grin on his face. "Welcome to my collection," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You're never leaving this farm alive." All I remember is the sound of my classmates screaming as Roy lunged at me, and then a moment later, cops burst in the door. I still don't know how they found us at that exact moment, or what student or teacher tipped them off, but I was beyond grateful. As they led Roy away in cuffs, and other personnel arrived, I only had one question. What would have just happened to me if they hadn't gotten there in time? My sophomore year in high school, we took a rather strange field trip to a toothpaste and tuna canning facility. It was supposed to be an educational tour, but it turned into a nightmare. The facility was old, and the machinery looked like it belonged in a horror movie. The smell of fish and mint filled the air, making me nauseous. As we walked through the factory, I noticed that the workers looked tired and unhappy. They moved slowly, almost like zombies. Our guide, a man named Mr. Jenkins, led us to a large room filled with huge machines. He explained that this was where the toothpaste was mixed and packaged. The machines roared to life, and the room was filled with a deafening noise. As we watched, one of the machines malfunctioned, and a large amount of toothpaste exploded out of it. The white goo covered everything in its path, including some of the students. Panic ensued, and everyone ran for the exits. I found myself separated from the rest of the group, lost in a maze of corridors. I could hear the screams of my classmates, but I couldn't find my way out. The lights flickered, and I could hear strange noises coming from the shadows. I turned a corner and found myself in a room filled with a giant vat of tuna. The smell was overpowering, to say the least, and I could see the fish moving inside the vats. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I turned to see a man with a deranged look in his eyes. He was covered in blood, and his clothes were torn. "This place is cursed." I tried to run, but he grabbed me and pulled me towards one of the vats. I struggled, but he was too strong. He was going to throw me into the vat. Just as I was about to give up hope, a group of my classmates found me. They fought off the man and helped me escape. We ran out of the facility, never looking back. To this day, I still have nightmares about that field trip. The toothpaste and tuna canning facility was a place of horror, and I'll never get over it. I never knew there was such a thing as a GPU and peanut butter and jelly sandwich factory, but that's exactly where my 8th grade class took a field trip. The factory was a massive, sprawling complex, with towering smokestacks belching out clouds of steam and the smell of burnt toast. Our tour guide, a young woman with a bright smile and a clipboard, led us through the facility, pointing out the various machines and processes that turned raw ingredients into the delicious sandwiches we all loved. We saw conveyor belts stacked with jars of peanut butter and jelly, and machines that sliced and toasted the bread. It was fascinating, in a strange sort of way. But as we moved deeper into the factory, the atmosphere began to change. The air grew thick and oppressive, and the machines seemed to take on a sinister appearance. Our guide's smile faded, replaced by a grim expression as she led us into a dimly lit room filled with rows of giant, humming machines. "This is the GPU room," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the heart of our operation." I peered into the gloom, trying to make out the shapes of the machines. They were like nothing I'd ever seen before, hulking, monstrous things, their surfaces covered in a thick layer of grime and oil. The hum of their operation was deafening, and I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my feet. "What's a GPU?" I asked, my voice trembling. The guide turned to me, her eyes dark and unreadable. "It's a machine that enhances the flavor of our sandwiches," she said, "but it comes at a cost. A terrible cost." Before I could ask what she meant by that, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. The hum of the machines grew louder, and I could hear the sound of something heavy moving in the shadows. "Run!" the guide screamed, and we all turned and fled, our footsteps echoing off the cold metal walls. But it was too late. The machines had awakened, and they were hungry. Hungry for something more than just peanut butter and jelly.